The 10-year vision, you hinted at this a little bit. This was actually a question of mine because I'm very interested by this with a lot of people. You mentioned the youth. I have a company, Fit Kids, Fit Future. It's a health and PE curriculum within the public school system, which we can discuss at another time, I'm sure, with the implementation of a curriculum in a public school system and the challenges with that. Yep. But what is your vision with youth and education? Because we have a gymnastics facility here attached to our adult facility. We work with about 80 youth. It's an amazing little rural setting. The head coach, Aaron Glazier, is amazing. What is your plans with the kids?
Yeah, well, it's a vision where I think it's a step in the direction of making everyone aware of what I'm calling this physical freedom. And the youth involvement, where OPEX comes into that, where education comes into that, the policies around it, the tearing down walls of all the shit that gets in front of that, et cetera, is long and arduous. But the way that you start is not by like struggle and hustle. You got to start with a concept that is so uncomfortable, it's probably right. And this is the uncomfortable notion I start with, as to like what that looks like for a long-term vision, is that every child, by the time they're finished, whatever it's called in education, from 3 to 18 years of age, is taught how to take care of themselves.
Yep.
They're taught how to nourish themselves. That idea in itself sounds so simple, right? And everyone nods their head, right? And everyone at the parent-teacher organization, all the way up to the school boards, all the way up to the White House, would be like, oh yeah, so virtuous. That's exactly what we want, right? But everyone inside of that conversation all stops that from happening.
Yep.
They prevent it from happening.
Yep.
Now, then you can get into areas of, why that is. I'm a little bit more of a contrarian on it, thinking that it's all based upon it not making money for people.
Sure.
If it can't make money, then we're probably not going to get inside of it.
Yep. And
then you can at least make sense to why policymakers are hesitant to put it inside the school system. And I usually have, two arms of argument inside of that. Number one, it used to happen. And when it did happen before, with woodworking, home economics, physical movement, not physical education, physical literacy, right? It was called physical education, but it wasn't sport development, right? It was physical literacy. These things used to be inside of that golden thing on the hill that was developed, let's call it post World War, in terms, or post Dust Bowl, of this educational system as to what we're going to teach these younger people, right? And it was these were the four basic premises, right? Literacy, computation, history, and physicality, right? Yeah. These are the four things that were stuck in, right? And what did that do? I don't know. Created the greatest generation ever on this planet, which was the 1950s, 1960s individuals, yep. Right? It created people who had the thinking to say, fuck this is the color of my skin and this is how I'm going to be treated. These people changed an entire universe based upon, what they had as these four pillars inside of their education, right? So I really go heavy on that being the argument for. Secondly, which is the easiest argument, how has the current thing been working out?
Amen to that.
It is the shits,
yep.
Right? It's the shits. And you and I can go on,
sure.
That's something you should probably do over coffee and then never tell the public about it. But it's really disgusting how yep. bad that is for a yep. couple of hours, because it's yep. such easy picking, right?
Sure.
Such easy picking. But those would be the two arguments. To my proposition would be, let's get back to that old school concept of thinking that's going to provide these individuals with, I just give ideas, what does that look like, right? So there's always the question from the teacher, right? Because I've spoken to teachers about this, like, smart ass, what is that going to look like? You know what it's going to look like?
Absolutely.
When that person's 18, they're never going to ask anyone for the rest of their life what they should eat or how they should move. Yeah. They're never going to have to ask anyone. They're never going to have to watch an Instagram video. They're never going to have to watch YouTube. They're like, that the answers will already be done. You know why? Because the answers have already been done. It's been done actually for millions of years, depending upon your belief. If you don't believe that, okay, it's been done for 6,000 years, right? Like getting energy from the earth, right? Getting energy from the planet, physically freedom in terms of movement, and contemplation and learning. Like this shit has been in the system for a long period of time, right? I'm sorry, we're giggling. Well, why are we giggling at this? Anyways, I think we're giggling because it's so dystopic of the current perception. So I would like that as a vision where those youth, now, if you keep tiptoeing with that story, you know what's going to happen, right? You know, everyone's like, okay, so if that happens, that means that fitness is deconstructed. Yes, it is.
Sure. Yes.
That does mean that deep fitness is deconstructed. It's taken, the power is taken away from fitness.
Sure.
The power gets placed back in the person. And the only entry into that, the only way through is epistemology. It's knowledge, right? So we want to make my children who are currently on that like indirect path of that. I want my girls by the time they're 18, recognizing that when they go out and play soccer, they're just running around in a field, kicking a ball outdoors, right? That's it.
Sure.
There's nothing more than that, right? And why did they do it? They're doing it because it's for them and because they're capable of doing it. That's it. Oh, it's not for a Division I scholarship or for losing weight or metabolic output or it's like, no, it's got nothing to do with that, right? So that then when they become 19 and then the 25 and then 32, you know, someone's gonna be like, oh, what do you do? It's like, I don't know, I just move every day because it's for me, you know, like, oh, it's very complex. I don't know what to eat. And then my daughter's like, what do you mean you don't know what to eat? There's been 100 million examples of what we know, what we need to eat to be mentally acute and physically functioning. So that's I'll stop there. I'm excited about what that's going to look like. As I finish with that excitement, I have to be super honest too. I'm really pessimistic around the 99%.
Sure.
I'm really pessimistic around that because that power will envelop, you know, guaranteed, you know, 5 years down the road into this process, you know, something's going to thwart that, right? Something's going to be like, oh, we're not going to allow that to happen, you know, which is currently happening in public education systems, right? Is they don't want to have that, you know, the one that, I don't know if you want to go there for, you know, what is considered physical freedom. Because when I talk about physical freedom, you know, immediately the educators are like, but if it's free, how are we going to test people? You see that? That's where it goes. It's like, you're asking the wrong question. That's the wrong question, right? If something is free, it's education. It's education based and competency based, right? Like, I mean, how good are you at taking care of yourself, right? Like that will always be, and this is the rub. It'll always be very subjective, right? And so this is the reason why we got into, like, I call it like free throws, right? We went from physicality to free throws. Is like, you know, and people are still pumping the free throws, right? Like biomechanics and, you know, LeBron James is so fit and look, he's on the commercial. It's like, but people forget, you know why they did it is because you could test someone. So Timmy, who couldn't make a free throw, didn't score well in his physical education. And I think that's disgusting.
So do I.
I think that's disgusting. And listen, another time, you know, I propagated that. I was even part of that education and post-secondary institutions for that, right? But it's immediately why I like jolted towards adults after a couple of weeks spending at this lower income physical education school in St. John's, where at the end of every day, I just felt sad. I was like, not only do I feel really bad that I can't teach these kids what I know about physical movement and physical freedom and expression, but I was basically just herding cats. Like, and then I say, well, is it the kids? Like, no, it's not the fucking kids. It's the top-down system that says, when you get in here, you're going to be scored based upon how many goals you can score. When I set up this ball to kick in the net, right? It's like, oof, that's not going to, I'm immediately going, how's that carrying over to them loving fitness? You know? Like, oh my gosh.
That was the number one question we got. I've probably done 100 presentations in front of schools through the years with this curriculum, or just a movement curriculum in general. And they ask, how can we assess the kids to know they're getting better, right? That's the first. The second is, how much does it cost? And the third is, how much harder will it be from what I'm doing now? James, that's a dead honest truth. I've sat in front of stood in front
disgusting.
of 30 school superintendents, all
That's
with
disgusting.
laptops, all in suits and ties. Not very, very, very rarely did we get a question that was centered around the kids' well-being. And on top of that, I've had many, we'll call them overweight individuals question me publicly on the validity of the movements that we've chosen, asking me, how do I know they work?
Yeah, that's they're trying to plant a red herring. They're trying to put something inside that, sounds like it's going to get stuck in the way, and they can't even, logically think it out. But because you have to get yourself out of a logical issue now, it seems like they're on their high horse of like, oh, this is never going to be workable, The fact that third question is there is disgusting. But it does show you what I mentioned of the list of 30 things that are going to get in the way of this kind of concept happening, right? And so it's important to lay that out first, right, with the beacon, because you need to know what questions are going to come, right? You need to know that they're going to ask questions based upon that. And it takes individuals like you being able to go through that question and answer period over time to come up with that list of 3 things. So that down the road, people that come after you are going to be like, oh, I bet you're going to ask these 3 things, right? Well, here's my answers, and these are my reasons for my answers based upon that. I think another way we could probably look at it too, which I'm kind of somewhat hesitant of because I'm not sure if it would be successful, is the classic education of choice issues that have come up since the early aughts, let's say, which have had, and no one likes to talk about it, massive success with minority and lower class individuals or lower socioeconomic class individuals, right? No one wants to point to those stories, right? Anyways, that's a whole disgusting thing based upon the hidden secrets in charter schools and that. But what it does bring up is private education that may be attached to the future public schools. And we see it happening in some other areas now, right? So there are some private groups that are coming in to teach, like my children have some private groups come in and teach, what was it? I forget what subject it was. Gosh, maybe it was art. Anyways, where a private group came in and taught like a concept, but they're in the public education system. But there's a private entity that somehow made their way in, right?
Who funds
so think
that?
about that. Maybe over time, it's the private groups that come in. But the reason why I kind of hesitate on top of that is that it's the story of my daughter's current deconditioned, overfat physical education coach. Who sits on the sidelines and looks at his phone while they're just doing shit, right? And I'm like texting my daughter, oh, this is what you can do with your hour. Like anyways, besides that, but he wasn't physically educated in post-secondary. So this is the classic stall we're going to have, is that these people didn't go into university like, I'm going to be the greatest physical education professional ever, right? No, we just picked them off the street, or they couldn't do science. So they're like, oh, you can't do science? Go do phys ed. No, I'm not kidding. This is what ends up with that person. And then he's like, oh, what do we do in this class? Oh, basketball. Okay, here's the 3-point line. This is how it ends up. This is how it ends up. So, over time, maybe the people that make the decisions are going to come in and be like, that's not our physical education coach. And there'll be someone like you, right? You walk in a meeting and be like, that's who we want to have as our future physical education coach, right? They exude this love for physical expression, right? They give it off, my daughter's tennis coach says that, right? She's like, she just met me, or had conversation with me for the first time after just kind of back and forth conversation for weeks and weeks. And I just got to tell her what I do. And she was like, I knew that I could just, she's like, sometimes you can just tell, and I step back from that. I'm like, gosh, I'm glad I still have, I'm giving off that energy, right? Because, just imagine if I thought I was giving off that energy, but it looked like, hey, no, I'm not willing to have a conversation on what physical expression is, and she started asking questions about, the usual things, right? Her sleep and her neck and anyways. sorry I was lengthy on that, but that's I appreciate the questioning on it, and keep up the good work on that fight, because in the end, you may not see it come to fruition in your days, but you're going to lead a story of questions, and maybe you'll get people on the back end who you'll mentor, who will get in those positions and make those things happen.
I agree. It's a long-term process, but it's worth it, for
Yeah.
sure. So.